Hello everybody, my name's Chris. Today I want to show you how to set up your ToneX Modeler app in order to capture your rig. I will also explain to you and show you what kind of hardware you need for this process to work, and in the end you will be able to put your rig onto one of these ToneX pedals. Could be a small one like this, could be one of the bigger ones. Alright, let's do this. I'm not going to bore you with long talking before we start with the actual tutorial. Just real quick, this is not a sponsored video. I bought the ToneX One myself. This is the brown sound edition because it was on sale, and also I wanted to shrink my rig down in order to, travel with it for some upcoming shows. And yeah, it's been really cool. I never did anything like capturing my rig before because I don't own a camper or a similar device. And after setting everything up, I thought this was actually quite the A, fascinating process, and B, it was rather easy to actually get it to work. So if you have any questions about the setup or the hardware, just hit me up in the comments. I'll be glad to answer everything. And yeah, now I'm going to show you what kind of gear you need to do this. This won't include the ToneX capture device, which at first I thought was a must-have, but it's not. And you're going to see what I've been using to capture my rig right now. Alright, so in order to capture your rig via the ToneX Modeler app, you will need these 4 devices and of course a PC or Mac or whatever. None of these is set in stone. You can use whatever company or device you like, but it needs to be a certain type of device, of course. So I'm going to go through each of these real quick and tell you about them, and then I'm going to show you the actual capture process. So this right here is the Focusrite Scarlett 4i4, which is pretty much for now just a placeholder here. In my actual setup, I'm using the 8920, but that is not important because the setup is the same. What is important is that you have multiple outputs other than just 1 and 2, so at least a third one. And I just really didn't want to rip out the big 8920 and disconnect every cable for this little shot right here. So yeah, placeholder, but it still would work because it has more than just, can you see that? It has more than just outputs 1 and 2, it has also 3 and 4. Next up is the Palma da Capo reamp box, which is pretty much for going from the interface to your amp. So this is kind of like a reverse TI box. It brings the very hot line signal that comes out of your interface down to an instrument level signal that goes into your amp. So your amp is being pretty much fed a guitar signal then, like the ones that it is used to. So this is very important. You can use, again, whatever reamp box you like. This one worked perfectly fine for me for years now. Next up is the Torpedo Captor X by 2Notes, which is a load box as well as an attenuator. Now, this one is kind of optional depending on what the setup is that you want to capture. So what a load box does, it can replace your cabinet for your amp if you want to use just your head sound and then, enhance it with an IR of sorts or, whatever. Just want to send the direct signal from your amplifier to your PC. It also acts as an attenuator. So if you do have a 4x12, but you can't, because of your neighbors or whatever loudness reasons, you can't fully crank your amp. This one goes in between head and cabinet, and it just attenuates the sound down, the loudness. So you can still have the pushed valve sound, but at a quieter volume. So what this does here today with my setup and for our video is pretty much it takes the signal from the amp after, the guitar went through it, and it sends it back via XLR into the audio interface, which will of course sound a bit weird because there's no IR attached to it yet, but that's the whole point. You use the amp signal and then you can do whatever with it with whatever virtual cabinet you want to use. Should you decide to capture your full rig, so including a cabinet, this one would be out of the picture, and instead you would have just your microphone because you're miking the cabinet and you're sending that mic'd sound then back into the interface. And lastly, of course, your ToneX pedal of choice. For me, this is the ToneX One. I didn't want to invest yet in a bigger version because I wanted to build a very, very light travel rig, and being able to go to a gig via public transportation with only this in my jacket pocket. It comes with the included ToneX Modeler app, you need pretty much to have the license to use that app. Alright, now let's switch over to the software side of things, which would be the ToneX Modeler app. The app comes included in, the package. With every ToneX pedal, you have the base set of software, and then depending on if it's a limited version or a big or small, pedal, there's different additional packs that come with it. So once you open the ToneX Modeler app, this is the first screen that you're being greeted with, and you pretty much start the capture process by clicking down here on New Capture. Now in this screen, as you can see, you will select the kind of rig that you are going to capture. And depending on what you're choosing in the next screen, the little graphic and the signal path will change accordingly. So what we're going to do today is we're going to select guitar and we're going to select amp. And then we go into the next screen. All right, so as you can see here, the app will show us the exact signal path we have to, well, build in order for it to be ready to capture the sound of your rig. So this right here will be the centerpiece, the audio interface, and you select via the drop-down menu here your interface that you have connected to your PC or Mac. Now up here, as you can see, you will select the outputs that are connected to your studio monitors so that you're able to hear what it is that you're doing. Next up, and this is where the additional outputs of your interface come in, this is where you connect your reamp box. For me, output 6 was still available, so I connected a cable from output 6 to the reamp box, and that's the step. From the reamp box, you go then, of course, to your amp, just with a, with a cable, just like you would do with your guitar. So yeah, nothing really to explain here, just cable from here into the front of your amp. Now theoretically, you could also already put pedals right here. There's of course a different setup for, more complex rigs in the setup tab that will show you where exactly you can put now pedals. But, if you wanted to, you can, if like an overdrive is here, a main part of your sound, you can put that right here in between reamp box and amp. Again, just like if this was your guitar, of course you would put a pedal next and then you would go into the amp. So this is what you could do in theory here. Now next we're going to go from the amp to what is called here the amp recording box. This is of course referring to the load box. In my case, again, that's the Captor X. You can use whatever load box you like. It just needs to have an XLR out, or an output in general. So what you're doing is you're going to go from your speaker out directly into your load box or amp recording box, and then if you wanted to, you could take another lead and go to your cabinet, just in order to hear in the room what your amp is doing. Of course, you will be able to hear the signal that goes from here back into your interface as well. But, if you wanted to listen back to what it is that your amp is actually doing in the room, this could come in handy. So amp speaker out into your load box. If you wanted to, you could take then a cable from your load box back into the cabinet. And then you're going to take an XLR cable and go back into the interface. Now in my case, I'm going to go into the input 1. As you can see here, the Focusrite 8920 has loads of different, analog inputs as well as digital inputs. You choose whatever it is that is handy for you. For me, it's input 1. And this pretty much completes the general in air quotes loop that you're building. So the interface sends via the ToneX app a signal out of output, the additional output, in my case that's output 6, to the reamp box. That reamp box is connected via a regular guitar lead to my amp. The amp is connected via the speaker out to my load box. I do have a cabinet connected to that one as well. You're going to see that in a second. And the load box is going to send the signal right back into the interface, into the inputs. And now the final step in order to complete this setup is you will take your guitar and connect it to a separate input. In my case, that's input 2. Again, you can choose whatever input is available to you. And you need this to set your levels, your input levels that go into the amp. You will see that in a second. All right, we're going to go to the next window now. And as you can see, this is what I was just referring to. This is where you set the input level. And I'm going to pick up my guitar just now. I'll see it's picking stuff up. And as you can see, when I strum it, it tells me I'm at the correct loudness. Oh, if I strum harder, it tells me I'm too loud. So this is where you use then your input gain of your interface to, I'm going to turn it all down now. See, now it is way too quiet. If I turn it all the way up, it's going to overload like crazy. So yeah, you will need to find the perfect sweet spot where it says correct all the time. And you're not going to be able to hear that through the amp yet. This is where the next step comes in, and you will hear your amp for the first time being, sent a signal to. Now in this window, you will be able for the first time to actually hear your guitar through your amp again. So the setup that we completed right here, as well as with, we set up the input gain correct and all that. This is now all done and you can hear your guitar being sent to the amp. So I'm going to switch back and forth to my camera and back here to the screen capture, and you will hear and see now that I'm pretty much able to play through my amp. Now, since we don't have a setup where we're recording a cabinet with the amp, we will hear the direct head sound that comes from the load box, which always sounds weird and tinny and screechy and all that. So this is where the enable IR button comes in handy. You just can just load whatever IR it is that you have, that you prefer, into this setup for now. This will not be permanent. This is just pretty much for you to be able to hear what your amp will then sound through an IR. So once you made sure that everything works as expected and you can hear the amp and you can hear the load box signal, we can then go to the next window, and this is where we then check the return levels. So yeah, you can now either play your guitar again, or you can already send pre-recorded riffs to your amp if you want to have your hands free and adjust the input level of the input that receives the load box signal. And you can again experiment with different IRs that you can load via this button right here. So yeah, once that has been checked, you're pretty much good to go. So in this final step, before we click capture down here, you can now add metadata to whatever it is that you're capturing. As you can see, you can pick a picture of your amp that resembles it the most. In my case, that's a 5150, so I'm guessing Metal Classic, that should suffice. And then you give it a name, you give it keywords, you give it a description. You can add the amp's name in here so that you'll be able to find it quickly again. The channel that you've been using, the character. As you can see, there's like 5 different. It's clean, dry, high gain, fuzzy, and other, like 5 different categories, and then a comment for whatever, just in order for you to be able to differentiate between all your different captures. And once that is done, you're going to click capture and it will start. So I added a bit of metadata here just in order to demonstrate it, and we'll now start the capture process. And we will switch back to the camera in the amp room in a second for you to be able to hear what it is that the app actually sends to the amp. It's not just test noises and beeps and boops, it's actual riffs, so that's pretty cool. So yeah, here we go. So now that the capture process is over, the app will ask you to, train on whatever it captured or listened to. I'm guessing this is where the AI takes over, and this process takes, I think, somewhere around from 20 to 40 minutes. I don't know what influences its length. I'm guessing software updates or just, the current algorithm or whatever is behind what it is doing. And now we have access to the capture sound of the rig and can transfer it via USB onto the pedal. Which is, once you set it up once and it works, it then only takes about, including the AI training, half an hour for everything to be done. So yeah, it's not something that you have to stand next to and wait for it to, do its job properly. It's an automated process, and then you just add metadata and a cool picture, of the amp that resembles your amp, and it's done. So how freaking cool is that? So yeah, I'm super excited to, bring my Marshall and my 5150 now on the road when it's a digital only show and have it just in my, just in my pocket. It's crazy what is possible these days. I know I sound like I'm a super old man, but yeah, it's still, yeah, it's amazing. So this is very much exciting, and I'm looking forward to experimenting with it more. IK Multimedia, they create good stuff. Some of their plugins I have been using for years or over a decade or whatever, and it works. So yeah, I'm a fan of this, and maybe someday I'm gonna buy the bigger version of this, because already this sounds cool, and I'm excited to bring this on the road next week for the first time. Yeah. Alright, so if you have any questions about ToneX or the gear that I used or anything you've seen in the background of the video or whatever, just hit me up in the comments and I'll make sure to reply as quick as possible. Looking forward to doing that. I hope to see you in the next video. I'm sure there's going to be more ToneX content in the future. This is super fun and just crazy, like I said. And with that being said, my name's Chris, and that's that.